Dirty townsfolk, religious zealots, and backwoods politicians stuck in the past. We're not talking about my home state of Florida. This is The Apostle. The Apostle is a horror film written and directed by Gareth Evans. You guys will know Gareth Evans as the incredible filmmaker behind The Raid 2, and the Safe Haven portion of the VHS 2 horror anthology. The film stars Dan Stevens as Thomas. You guys will recognize Dan from his amazing performance in the Marvel show Legion. He's been in a bunch of other stuff, way too many to name, but he's especially good at period dramas. The film also stars Michael Sheen as Prophet Malcolm. You guys will recognize Michael Sheen from the Underworld franchise, from Masters of Sex, and from Frost Nixon. In 1908, a man named Thomas, long thought dead, returns home and finds out that his sister is being held captive by a cult on an isolated island. He decides to go and rescue his sister. In order to do that, he has to actually find a way onto this isolated island and blend in with the cult as one of their members. So as you guys know, when I talk about movies, I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. That being said, let's get with the good. The first thing you're going to notice is the amazing shot selection, cinematography, and editing of this film. Gareth Evans has always been a talented filmmaker, but most of his films, being action-oriented, tend to have like a shaky feel, where this has a much more stable, smoother, big sweeping shots, really clever punch-ins. The cinematography used as a narrative device is just fantastic in this film. The wide shots that he uses in this film, whether it be to show these big barren landscapes or to show the town, it really makes the land one of the main characters in the film. And that's fitting to me because I feel like one of the main themes in this movie is man's inability to connect with Mother Nature in a way that's not exploitative. Dan Stevens is a really powerful actor who can say a lot with just expressions and stuff like that, which works in this film because he's kind of a quiet character who only speaks when he needs to. And as always, he gives a super intense performance, and that suits the film very well because this film is a very intense film. If there's not, a moment of tension, there's a moment of violence. Right away from the start of the movie to the finish, the pacing is pretty steady. The intro is nice, it's really punchy, and it gets you involved in the story pretty quick. I really love the dark Gothic setting of the film. Everything looks old, it has a lived-in feel to it, everything has dirt and grime on it, nothing looks clean and new. The world building in this movie is a lot of show with just the right amount of tell. The exposition in this film is handled really well. It's done through, letters and through the sermon of the prophet, conversations. It never feels like some big exposition dump. There's only a little bit of it, and that is one of the good things about the film. There's a lot of stuff that happens where you don't quite get it. They don't say what it is. You kind of have to sit there and think about it and realize what's going on. So it really treats the audience with respect. The film is just drenched with this palpable sense of foreboding and dread and fear, and it stays that way from start to finish. And with Thomas being new to the island and new to the cult, he's basically finding out information as he goes along, as are we. I don't like when I feel like an outside observer who knows more about what's going on than the character does. So to see how the cult worked through his eyes from the induction process all the way up into the inner politics of the different individuals in the cult was pretty interesting. I liked Michael Sheen as Prophet Malcolm. Even though he's the villain of the film, he's very realistic, and it feels like all the decisions that he's making aren't out of some type of villainous intent. He's doing it for the good of the cult and the good of the people on the island. The score that accompanies the film is really good. It really helps you get immersed into this world. It has a lot of strange sounds and motifs, and they kind of drive them home. And when you hear certain sounds, you know this type of thing is going to happen. And when you hear other ones, you know that this other thing may be happening. I'm not saying what they are because I don't want to spoil anything about this movie. There were some genuinely surprising moments and plot twists in this, and I like that. I always like to be surprised because, again, that's not something that happens very often for me, the jaded film nerd. And this film really addresses one of the questions that I often ask is, why is it the people that perceive themselves to be so righteous often are the cruelest or do really messed up stuff to achieve their goals? And there's kind of 3 plot lines to this film, and all 3 are done really well. You have the whole like politics of the cult and who's in charge and what's going on. You have Thomas trying to find his sister Jennifer. And then you have the romance of Jeremy and Fionn and what the townsfolk think of it. The character designs of the film, whether it be the costumes of the cult, the normal people, you know, the ones who look like they've just been there for a while and they need a bath, or the cult members who are like higher up and they have certain outfits, and the few creature designs, they're all done really well. They put a lot of thought into it, and it definitely helps set the mood of the film and really fits in with that dark Gothic theme. With the exception of maybe one of the last shots in the film, the CGI work throughout the entirety of it is really solid. And adds to the film. It doesn't take away from it. There are a few flashbacks in the film that kind of speak to other things that happen with characters. A lot of times flashbacks can feel forced, or they can feel like they're just there to pad the runtime or the story. But in this, I actually wish there had been more flashbacks to their past, especially Thomas's backstory, because when they do go back there, it's really dark, it's really interesting. Like, I would actually be interested in seeing Thomas's backstory in its own film. And again, this film has a lot of aspects that are basically metaphors for politics and the nature of man and how we deal with the environment and a lot of other things. So it's got a lot of depth to it. And all of the performances from start to finish really knock it out of the park. We have a lot of classically trained actors in here, and I think that helps. So putting all that good aside, let's talk about the bad. The film can be really dark sometimes. Now, I don't mean tone, I mean actually dark. The cinematography, a lot of it takes place at night, and it looks fantastic. But I definitely recommend that you turn your lights off and you watch this film in the dark, because you can see a lot more detail to it. If you're watching it like the space where I watch it in, and there's a lot of light, you're gonna miss some things. It got to the point where I actually got up and turned off all the lights in my office so that I could see it better. Now, I really enjoyed the slow, methodical world building and character building and all that kind of stuff, but some people may get turned off by it. I mean, it's not till around like 44 minutes or something where something kind of shocking or different happens. Without that first 44 minutes and that buildup, that stuff that happens from the second act until the end wouldn't really have as much of a payoff. There are some things that happen to a lot of the characters in this film, characters that you liked, and it really frustrates you, it really bothers you when it happens. It's definitely needed. These parts are integral to the film. They don't get injured or die or whatever it is for no reason. They serve a purpose. Now, does it suck still? It sure does. But that speaks to good writing and good characters and great acting. One of the things that annoyed me and kind of surprised me, because Gareth Evans can do really great, solid, smooth camera work like he did in The Raid with all that great frame matching and make the cuts fairly seamless. I'm always going to see the cuts because I'm an editor, but a lot of people aren't going to notice some of these cuts. But in this film, there is a lot of shaky cam during like the action and the horror scenes, like way too much shaky cam, and I really didn't feel like it was needed. Just relax, dude, and let your image speak for itself, because it's framed and lit and cut and everything strongly, so you don't need to shake that camera. But the more I thought about the camera shake, I feel like if the camera lingered on, you know, this person being hurt or this really scary part or whatever, maybe it would dishearten or unnerve the normal viewer. So I think that might be the reasoning behind it, because if you watch something like Safe Haven, which is his really, really dark cult story that he did for VHS2, that camera's pretty steady most of the time, and you see all the detail. And a lot of the people I've talked to that have seen that short were really turned off by the violence and the gore and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was just awesome. I thought it was kick-ass. But again, that normal viewer, that Netflix binge watcher, might say, oh, this is too much, and they might turn it off. So I think that's why the camera shake was in there. I still hated it, but it is what it is. You know, if you have to cut between certain parts of a sequence, but making them look like there wasn't a cut, he is one of the best there is. And that's why there's a few times where there is some action or something in this movie. Some cuts are so obvious and there's a bit of a jar to it. It just really stood out, and I was really surprised by it. So much so that it took me out of the movie a little bit. Now, Thomas's whole point of going to this island is to rescue his sister Jennifer. I never really felt like a strong connection between them, or like it mattered. I felt more of a connection between like him and the prophet, or him and other people in the town, than I did with him and his sister, which is not how it should be. You know, this is the brother and sister. You should really feel that relationship, whether it be through a little more, you know, flashbacks or some letters or something. Make that connection stronger, make the audience feel it. Now, the way that Thomas gets onto the island is a mystery. You see that he has an invite in his hand, but you're like, how did he get the invite? What did he have to do to get the invite? I would have liked to have seen that, you know. Add 5 or 10 minutes to the film and show us how that happened. The ending is going to frustrate a lot of people. It's going to confuse others, and some aren't just going to get it at all. They're going to get turned off, and they're going to think the movie is really bad because of the ending. When I went online to get the trailers to use in the cutting of this review, I noticed that there are a ton of ending explained videos on YouTube and a bunch of articles explaining what certain things meant and what the final shot meant. So I think maybe they lost a lot of people with that ending. I don't think it was the most satisfying ending, but it definitely made sense in the grand scheme of things for the film. I think the CGI in the last shot kind of cheapened it because it wasn't done very well. Now, most of the CGI in the film was great, so to have the final shot, the most important shot of the film, be tarnished a bit by the CGI was a bit surprising. Now, having seen Gareth Evans' other work, I definitely think he should have pushed further with the themes, with the cult, with the violence, with the gore. That's probably my biggest complaint with the movie, was it didn't do as much as it should have or as it could have. And again, I think that was to spare the normal viewer, the casual viewer, what we're used to seeing in his other films and with a lot of the stuff that we like to watch, especially when it comes to horror. Overall, I thought it was a good movie. It was entertaining. It was definitely worth the watch. And I think because he kind of kept it safe for the general audience in this film, he kind of took away from the longevity, but definitely worth at least one watch. So all that being said, what is my score? Drum roll, please. 6 out of 10.